All right, so this is Jomi here, IAPC Atlanta Chapter Secretary. I'll be the moderator for the meeting, and I want to welcome you all and a good morning. And I see quite a few of you join. First of all, thank you for Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, and also
Thank you.
and our Chairman Joseph M. Chalu, waiting to join our Consul General. Consul General also joined, Dr. Swati Kulkarni. We welcome you all to our meeting. And this is going to be one of a kind meeting that we've been hoping and planning for the past few months or even more regarding some of the issues we would like to attend and address some of the concern of many of our meetings been addressing. It's getting the round around, so we trying to bring some of the real answers to questions and concerns of our the members of the IAPC and those who have been bringing this legitimate question. We want to address it in a professional way. That's why we thought to have a meeting instead of having individual meetings in a different chapter setup. So this will be our privilege to have some of the lead members from the Government of India, especially Ambassador and the Consul General, and they will be covering some of the important questions for us. And the order of the meeting, we will have assigned different individuals to bring our delegates to the question answer session, and also we have one or two different individuals assigned to ask these questions to our delegates. At the end of each questionnaire session, they will get a chance to speak in general, whatever they want to address, for about 3 to 4 minutes. I understand that some of our delegates have time limits, and we totally get that. And we will be standing by for any of your further explanation in a future meeting. So total time frame that we scheduled for today's meeting is 60 minutes. By 12, we'll be closing this meeting session here. And right now, I would like to invite Annie Anuel. She's from the National Board of Indo-American Press Club, and she would be the person who will be introducing our delegates to the meeting. Annie Anuel, take it from now.
Thank you, Jomi. Good morning, all. I would like to welcome Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, a luminary diplomat who has had a distinguished career working closely with leaders and policymakers around the world. His latest book, Beyond the COVID-19 Pandemic, Envisioning a Better World by Transitioning the Future of Healthcare, is on Amazon's bestseller list. He has also conferred Excellence in Literature Award by the IAPC 2020 and Healthcare for All Award by the Raymond Aron Group in 2020. Welcome, Ambassador Kapoor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Chalil. Dr. Chalil is our chairman, and he is the author of several scientific research papers and international publications. He's also a co-author of the Beyond COVID-19 Pandemic along with Ambassador Kapoor. I would like his eminent leadership with IAPC has helped us to outreach to various fraternities of social importance and government administrations in US and India. Welcome, Dr. Chalil.
Thank you.
I would like to invite Mr. Kamlesh Mehta, our IAPC Director and founder of South Asian Times, to introduce our next guest, Consul General of India. Mr. Mehta.
Namaste, thank you. Okay, namaste and welcome to IAPC webinar. IAPC Chairman Dr. Chalil and everyone in Team IAPC are sincerely appreciated for the initiative of having such informative webinars. IAPC is truly a great platform for such activities. Thank you all at IAPC. I am proud to be a part of IAPC. It is my honor to introduce Consul General of India in Atlanta, Honorable Dr. Swati Kulkarni. Incidentally, I got a couple of opportunities to meet her personally. All the times I was left impressed with her warmth of simplicity and deep understanding, knowledge and wisdom. She is truly very humble, helping, and excellent host. My son lives in Atlanta. We also want to have an edition of South Asian Times in Atlanta. Unfortunately, due to COVID, I could not travel. I wish I could meet Swati ji more often. Dr. Swati Vijay Kulkarni is a career diplomat who holds MBBS degree from the prestigious Government Medical College of Nagpur, and she joined the IFS, Indian Foreign Service, in year 1995. Prior to her appointment as Consul General in Atlanta, she served Regional Passport Office, Mumbai, Consul General in Cape Town, South Africa, Deputy Head of the Mission in Muscat, Oman. Dr. Kulkarni previously saw the overseas assignment were as a First Secretary in High Commission of India in London, where she successfully worked as a nodal officer for preventing discrimination for Indian medical graduates after the implementation of new UK immigration rules. She was First Secretary in the High Commission of India in Port Louis, Mauritius, and as a Third Secretary as a language trainee in Embassy of India in Spain. At headquarters, Dr. Kulkarni worked as an additional private secretary to the External Affairs Minister, later deputed as a regional passport officer in Pune, and under secretary looking after Austria, Cyprus, Greece, Slovenia, Switzerland, and Holy See, Malta, Portugal, and many other countries. Dr. Kulkarni is married to Mr. Vijay Jayant Kulkarni, who is an ex-merchant mariner by profession and has 2 daughters. Her interests include study of development issues, swimming, and tennis. Please welcome Dr. Kulkarni with big round of applause. Dr. Kulkarni.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, Kamlesh ji, for your kind and generous introduction. You have standing invite to visit us in Atlanta always. You are most welcome. My warm greetings to our ambassador, Pradeep Rawatji. He is very, we look at him, he is our role model. My warm greetings to all IAPC team who is working hard to make this event successful, and all the audience who are listening to us. So I'm happy to know that IAPC is celebrating this Pravasi Indians 2021. My felicitations to all of you. This is a very difficult time for all of us. It's a very challenging time. Why? Because this COVID pandemic is here and it's a huge crisis. So for all of us, virtual has become really actual. So this crisis has no parallel in living memory. It's not only a catastrophe on health front, but it is also a crisis on political front, social front, economic and cultural front. The world is upside down, everything is topsy-turvy, but something has remained unchanged. And what is that? That's we the people, our steadfast commitment to mitigate this crisis and our stubborn hope to put it behind us. And we are succeeding in that endeavor. As far as India's COVID-19 response is concerned, our leadership really acted proactively. There was a coordinated and comprehensive response to this virus scourge, and this was done in consultation with all the chief ministers of the state. This was done again within the framework of our democratic and federal polity. Our response has been applauded by WHO. We have seen lockdown on the 55th day of the outbreak when we had only 600 cases. So lockdown enabled us to ramp up our healthcare facilities, to do PPE production, test kits and things like that. And today, due to these decisive steps, we have ensured in strengthening our medical infrastructure. And that is why we have a low death rate and a very, very high recovery rate. So I can encapsulate our response with 3S approach, where we had speed, scale and skill. And on all these 3 fronts, we really worked very, very well. As of 31st January 2021, we have succeeded in bringing back 4 million Indians stranded in different parts of the world. Currently, phase 9 of Vande Bharat is working, And you may recall that initially when it was launched during the early COVID lockdown period, we, from the consulate in association with our embassy in Washington, we worked really hard day and night so that people from this part of the world could travel back and meet their dear and near ones. So from our jurisdiction, when we worked for phase 1, phase 2 and extended phase 2, we succeeded in sending around 700 Indians who were stranded here and who were in distress. So that operation, we are very proud that we have done our bit as far as helping our people here are concerned. Now we do have, apart from Air India, which is doing this operation on a commercial basis purely, that air bubble agreement is also there with our extended neighborhood beyond and also with airlines in USA. Recently, we have celebrated 16th Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, what we call the PBD convention. And the theme was contributing to Atmanirbhar Bharat. It was again held virtually because of these challenging times. And this was done in the first week of January, on 9th of January. Many of you must have heard our Prime Minister and other dignitaries who spoke on the occasion. Our Prime Minister emphasized how the role of Indian diaspora in strengthening the brand India. And then also earlier our Honorable Prime Minister, when there was India Global Week, which was held in UK in 2020, he spoke about the role of India's talent force. He said how our Indian professionals, our hardworking laborers, our doctors, our nurses, our lawyers, engineers, how they are, contributing to the global revival, how they are proactively working towards it, and how they are creating the two-way synergy that is beneficial to the all humanity. So as is known, the press is the fourth pillar of democracy. Freedom of press is important, it's a right. The balanced and factual narrative is very, very important. Then only we can say that nation is speaking to itself. So I'm happy that IAPC is working very hard to achieve these objectives. They are promoting effective journalism. They are preserving freedom of press. They are offering educational and networking opportunities to students and others. Keep up the good work, and my felicitations to all of you once again. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you,
Excellent.
Consul General.
Very nice.
Excellent.
So at this time, we prepared 2 questions for Consul General to respond to, and we would like to invite Joseph K. to come on board and answer this question, and he will take from here for the next several minutes. Joseph?
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm Joseph Baris. Thank you for joining us, Honorable Consulate General Dr. Sadi Kulkarni. I'll be asking two questions. Please take 4 minutes to answer on each question. First question is about vaccine. Would you please elaborate as on vaccine Maitri?
See, on January 16, our government of India, they launched a huge immunization drive across India. So far we have seen phase 1. So we will have a phase 2 shortly as we speak. So during the phase 1, we have succeeded in immunizing about, as I was seeing the TV today, we have done already 8 million people. And then these are all frontline and health workers. The second phase, the government is starting shortly, where we will also immunize those who are above, beyond 50 years, and those who have comorbidities. So that also we will see, and both these phases will vaccinate about 300 million people. This number itself is a very staggering number, and this will fast track our economic drive. The other thing is the launch of Vaccine Maitri. So this launch of Vaccine Maitri is a landmark in our diplomacy. Because what happens in accordance with an Honorable Minister's commitment, where we have to deploy our vaccine production and we have to deliver the capacity for the benefit of humanity, because we feel that this is our role as a responsible Indian, a responsible international citizens, and as responsible stakeholders. So we want to showcase our brand India, where we want to reiterate and showcase that we are the pharmacy of the world. So far we have given 20 countries and the work is in progress. The more countries are there, we will give to 25 more other countries. So far we have given over 15 million doses. And most importantly, here we are also portraying Atmanirbhar Bharat, where these vaccines, not one, but two, these two vaccines are made in India. And that's what it is. That's how we are strengthening our brand India.
Thank you for your answer. We appreciate that. Next question. How will the recent budget passed by Finance Minister impact India-US trade and economic partnership? Also, your opinion about the agriculture reform and recent development associated with in India?
See, you have seen the way we reacted again and again. This COVID-19 pandemic is real crisis on various fronts, including economic front also. So as far as our economic fundamentals are concerned, our economy is forecasted to contract by 7.7% in 2020-2021, but we will have a very good recovery. It will rebound and the recovery will be in double digits. It will be 10 to 12% in 2021-2022. So what we are seeing is a successful flattening of the curve where we will have a V-shaped recovery. And you have also seen that during early COVID, our government gave liquidity infusion, cash transfers, where you saw a mammoth 800 million people were given free food. 80 million people got cooking gas. The direct cash transfer was done at the click of button due to that JAM Trinity where we have done it successfully. The Jan Dhan Yojana, Aadhaar and the mobile, which our people have. Then there were structural reforms which were undertaken by government, which was Atmanirbhar Bharat 1.0, Atmanirbhar Bharat 2.0 and 3.0. So they have given series of reforms. First were the reforms in growth sectors like agriculture, power, civil aviation, mining. All those structural reforms have been done in these sectors. Then the focus on MSME, focus on manufacturing, and the government also gave new education policy, new tax policy where we have transparent taxation, painless taxation, honoring the honest. Then we have empowered group of secretaries who are fast tracking the inward investment. Mission Karma Yogi, how to make the civil servants more citizen-centric, human-centric. So all these reforms have to be seen first because the union budget has carried forward this process. Where we have seen even the product linked scheme in 10 sectors. That is why this union budget has to have this background because we are carrying forward what we did in COVID, how we converted the crisis into opportunity. So the budget speaks about all these processes which we did to how to do it more and in a good way. The healthcare sector, how to do more ramping up of our infrastructure, how to give universal water supply to everybody. Then how to have a volunteer vehicle scrapping, how to achieve that climate exchange, change things are happening, how to reduce that, how to mitigate it. So the government is again focusing on skilling, education, innovation, infrastructure, how to do the physical and that infrastructure in India. So the developmental aspect. So basically the budget is very holistic, inclusive, and it is a very with a mantra where government focuses on minimum government and maximum governance. So the union budget is going to give us a double-digit growth, and that's how our vaccination, again, I will emphasize, will play a role because it will give us an economic recovery which is required. And as far as the agricultural reforms are concerned, you know that government is committed to do the socio-economic empowerment of our farmers, how to double their income. So keeping that in mind, the parliament with full debate and discussion, they passed the reformist legislation related to the agriculture. This reform gives expanded market access and great flexibility to our farmers It also paves way for economically and ecologically sustainable farming in India. However, certain section of people in certain parts of India, a very small fraction, mostly from northern part of India, they had reservations about this reformist legislation. So respecting their sentiments within the democratic polity, our government initiated series of talks, and union ministers were part of these negotiations. And so far we had 11 such talks. The last one was held on 22nd January. And government has offered them that we will keep these reforms on hold for a year or so. And this has been iterated by our Prime Minister. Yet, certain vested interests, certain mischievous elements, they hijacked these talks and derailed them. And you saw the violence and vandalism that occurred on 26th January, which is such an important day for us, a very historic, a very important, significant day for us when we celebrate our enactment of constitution which came into force on that day. So that important day we saw so much violence, so much vandalism, and that's very unfortunate, very saddening. And our police people, they acted with so much restraint, but hundreds of our men and women, they were attacked, they were injured, they were seriously wounded. So all this is not good for India and for a civilized society also. These people, the vested interest, also worked on international mobilization, where they also indulged into desecration of Mahatma Gandhi's statue in Davis, California. You saw it, and other places. So this is not done. Government is committed to resolve this impasse within the democratic framework, keeping in view our constitutional ethos. And that's how we want to resolve it. But our India is, today, it has a self-confidence to stand on our own. We cannot have such a propaganda against India, where this India will push back. And this India is committed to talk with people and resolve the matter in a democratic way. I'm so happy that IAPC has organized series of talks, including the one on farm protest, including the one on India-US Defense Agreement, and many others. So we are very, very proud of you because, see, you are ambassadors in your own capacity. You are doing very good job of giving a balanced and factual narrative. So we are proud of you. Let us work to strengthen this engagement. Let us work to show the brand India so that people know, and we strengthen our India-US strategic partnership of global significance. Keep up the good work again. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for explaining to that. Indeed, it is a privilege to have you on our program. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Consul General, thank you so much for giving the insight, and we are so thankful for giving in that a little bit in a simple way for everyone to understand, and we will make sure that the people in our platform and also the community here also know what's being told, and especially it's really important to understand the inside of the budget also. Thanks for giving that as well, and we give so much heartfelt thanks for your time. I know that you have a really busy schedule today, and I'm really thankful for joining us. And we would like to move on to our next questionnaire session. We would like to bring Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor on board, and Mr. Philip Thomas will be asking questions to Ambassador. Philip Thomas, take it from now on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. You hear me?
Good morning. Yeah, we can hear you clearly, yes.
Good morning, Ambassador Pradeep, and good morning, Consul General Dr. Swati. We really appreciate your time. It was a great honor for me to meet Consul General last week. Thank you and appreciate Madam for giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate her, taking the time to meet me. Thank you. Ambassador, I have a quick question. Do you please advise and guide us on the scope of achieving dual citizenship in 2021, the current year?
Thank you for the question. First, I would like to convey my profound thanks to Dr. Swati Kulkarni for joining us today and for elaborating on very important issues, which is of very great benefit for the entire community and the diaspora. So, after saying that, I would like to delve into this issue of dual citizenship. It is a very important matter for a large number of Indians who are settled outside India because of the various benefits it will bring, because of the various positives it will have both for India and for the Indian diaspora. Now, I have been working in the Ministry of External Affairs for many decades. I finished my assignments with them a few years back when I joined academics here. So what I tell you will be more based on my own personal experiences and my own involvement with these aspects. But it may not be absolutely up to date. It may not be the latest situation, because what has evolved now, you will be able to get a better fix on that from people like Dr. Swati Kulkarni or the Ambassador of India in Washington DC, or the respective consulate generals in the different parts of USA. We have quite a few in USA. So those consul generals will be able to give a much better response. You also will find a lot of data and inputs on the internet if somebody just does research in the following areas particularly. Organizations like the GOPIO, the Global Organization of People of Indian Origin, they have done a lot of groundwork for this dual citizenship. The organizations which are also diaspora organizations, which are in the US and in many other countries based in Europe and Australia and Canada and everywhere, they have also done a lot of hard work to put these proposals together and to forward it to the Government of India. So you will find a lot of information on those sites. You will also find a lot of inputs about this in what used to be the earlier Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs, which was born out of the Ministry of External Affairs, which is my parent ministry, the Ministry of External Affairs, and continued its independent existence for many years till it was again merged back with the Ministry of External Affairs a few years back in 2016. So that division now, which is called the Overseas Indian Affairs Division, will have a lot of data on it, because every year the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas is held in January on the day that Mahatma Gandhi returned to India. So on that day, this issue is raised continuously by the diaspora everywhere, asking for dual citizenship. Now, if I have to look at it from the perspective of the Government of India, what is that perspective? In the sense, what I was told during my work in the ministry was that at one stage, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, our respected Prime Minister, with whom I worked very, very closely, he was quite inclined to consider this grant of dual citizenship. But then again certain things overtook the discussions on this issue, and it went into the background again, into the back burner. Now, if you are in India and you start thinking about it with a mindset of a person living in India or visiting India, the problems that you face are very, very many. Very, very many, both internal and external. From the external problems, let me focus first on the external problems. You have security issues. You have some of the most difficult neighbors in the world, respectively Pakistan and China. And some neighbors who are not the most difficult but are difficult neighbors. Like, for example, sometimes it's Bangladesh, sometimes it is Nepal. So you're in a very hostile neighborhood. It is also the epicenter of terrorism. The main epicenter of terrorism in the world is Pakistan. So you are right next to Pakistan. Now for India to set any parameters for, I mean, they have gone a very big way in opening up various aspects of citizenship for the diaspora, the expatriate Indian community. NRIs do not have any problem because they have the Indian passport. But the ones who have non-Indian passports, like the US passport or other countries' passports, I don't have to say it, there used to be the PIO card earlier, which was the person of Indian origin card, which gave you a certain amount of access and facilities in India. That graduated to a much better system, which was called the OCI card system, the Overseas Citizen of India. So the Overseas Citizen of India gives you a lot more access and facilities in India, except for a very few which you do not have in comparison to the Indian citizens. So that is a very good template for a majority of the Indians abroad. Now, for opening up to dual citizenship, if you start thinking along the lines, for example, of the security infrastructure of India, you say, okay, we allow dual citizenship across the world. Immediately, you will have millions of people lining up from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, from Nepal, from Sri Lanka, from Maldives, from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Iran, from everywhere. Already there are huge colonies of people from all these countries in India. When I was in Nepal as minister in the embassy there in Nepal, a Nepalese citizen, very prominent one, brought out a book on the employment opportunities for Nepalese in Nepal and in the world. And in that he concluded, very well-known author, that there are more Nepalese of the working age group working in India than in Nepal. More people of Nepalese origin, more citizens of Nepalese origin working in India than in Nepal. Similarly, if you count the number of Sri Lankans, I don't have to tell this to this group in South India, and you know that better than me, who are there in Tamil Nadu and other places, is in millions. Bangladeshi, the internal estimates of the Bangladeshis in India when I was in the ministry, they had more than 45 million people illegally in India from Bangladesh. 45 million is more than many countries' population. So they are spread out in many states in the border of Bangladesh, and they are spread out in Delhi. And if you go to Gurgaon or Haryana or Greater Noida, your rickshaw puller is a Bangladeshi, your maid at home who's working at home is a Bangladeshi. So it's very difficult to have anybody who's a non-Bangladeshi in any of these service capacities. And many of them have adopted some nicknames which are Indian names, like Raju and Uma and Usha and Anu and all that. So that in the first instance, when you employ these people, you think that they are not Bangladeshis. So it's only when you get into the depth of it, you realize they are Bangladeshis. So if you have all these issues, and if I go to Lajpat Nagar, I will see thousands of Afghanistanis, for example, walking around, utilizing the medical facilities in India. Thousands of Iraqis in different parts of Delhi, again doing the same, escaping from the terrorism in their countries and lounging around in India, in Delhi, having medical facilities, having access to all the other services which are available in India. So there are tens of thousands of these people, but this is something which is there in the Indian psyche for thousands of years. In the sense, we call US the land of immigrants, the melting pot, etc. But the original land of immigrants and the original melting pot is India, because even more than 2000 years back, when Alexander the Great invaded India, everybody knows the story. He defeated the king, the emperor Porus. So he asked Porus, what is your last wish before I put you to death? So the emperor Porus very proudly replied, I wish to be treated like one emperor treats another. So Alexander the Great liked that reply very much, and he then became close friends with Porus, and they started playing chess. And Alexander then did not leave India for about a year, more than 10 months. When he asked his army to pack up and leave India, 65% of his army decided to stay back in India and married Indian women, and 35% went back with him. So in India today, if you go to the north, where I come from, Punjab for example, or Kashmir, or even Maharashtra, you find these Shaswat Brahmins who have blue eyes and green eyes, which are descendants of the lineage from Alexander's army. So from that stage onwards, you had many other waves of immigrants who kept on coming. So I don't have to explain all those in detail, because you had the Mughals, the Mongols, the slave dynasty, the Khiljis, etc., etc. It went on and on. And the strange part about all these invasions was that the rulers decided to stay on in India and not go back to their mother countries. They would rule their own countries from India. So it's the biggest melting pot in that way. So it has enriched our culture, our food, our customs, our traditions, etc. in a big way. But what happens is, the moment you announce dual citizenship, I've told you one part of it. In America, if government announces, okay, only certain countries in the world, American citizens will be allowed dual citizenship. What happens? People of Pakistani origin, Bangladeshi origin, who have American citizenship, Chinese origin, they will start applying for Indian citizenship because of various reasons, security reasons also, to create disruptions in India. They already do that, but it will become more easier. So it is a multi-layered proposition. Now, where do I see this going? I currently see the following scenario for all of us, that there will be some more consideration of this as the years go by, and as you are able to build more technology into the systems to be able to manage these threats of, hawala transactions, of funding very wrong sort of organizations. We see what is happening with the farmers' agitation in India. So not only just terrorism, there are so many other threats. And working inside the government system in India, you suddenly realize the scope of threats and problems. And to give you an idea of the scope, if you are sitting in the US and Canada, the population of the entire continent of North America, US, Canada, Mexico, and the entire continent of South America, that is Caribbean, that is Central America, that is Latin America, so many countries. You add up the entire population of Brazil, big countries like Brazil, USA, etc., and all the other countries, and they still fall far short of the Indian population. So the Indian population is almost touching, it's crossing 1.4 billion, it will soon be 1.5 billion. And these two continents, which are so huge, with so many countries, with so many problems, are not even anywhere near the Indian population. So you can imagine the scope of internal problems in India, which are naturally going to be very, very vast, and the external problems because of a situation with the neighbors and the world situations. So it is not an easy solution. If you say, put yourself on the desk of a government officer who has to take a decision on dual citizenship, it is not an easy solution. It is not something you can say, yes, we will do it tomorrow or in 2021. But what will happen is the following. As we go along, more and more machine learning will be there, deep machine learning, more and more artificial intelligence. And then a stage will come where you are able to manage these threats in a much better way and control them. And at that stage, for the government to say, okay, for these categories of people whose parents, grandparents only were born in India, and it's not for the Caucasian Americans to have dual citizenship in the routine, unless they have lived in India for 5 years as green card holders and 5 years more, then giving citizenship to non-Indian origin people after very strict diligence and compliance requirements. And then you pledge your allegiance and loyalty to the Indian flag and the Indian country. And at that stage, that sort of format may evolve where it may make it possible for the government of India to consider dual citizenship. I'm going to stop here because we can carry on this discussion with questions later, but there are other questions waiting. But for this, from my side, I'm going to take a pause here on this issue of dual citizenship with this background.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your insight. We really appreciate it. As you know, we are really on time-bound meeting. So I just like to have one more question with you. Sorry. Could you please explain the scope of getting a uniform procedure to obtain a business loan in India, please?
Okay, so thank you very much, Philip. India is made up of 30 different states, and there is a lot of autonomy in the states, just like in the US. So there have been reports that the ease of doing business in India has been increasing very significantly in some states, whereas in other states it is still not as easy to do business, which we all know. I don't have to hide anything, it's an open fact. Now what has happened is that overall the factor of ease of doing business in India has been improving very, very significantly. If I remember correctly, about 3 years back it dropped 20 levels positively. So it was somewhere like 140 something, it dropped to 120 something. And currently it's near 100. So it is improving all the time. But what the World Bank and the government of India are saying, that if you look at certain states of India, like you look at Maharashtra or Gujarat or Karnataka, some of these states, maybe even Andhra or Telangana, I'm not giving an exhaustive list or an accurate list, but I'm just giving a suggested list. Then what happens? The ease of doing business in those states ranks in the World Bank listing in the top 40 or 50 of the world. They've already become so competitive that foreign agencies are very happy to go there and invest in a very big way with FDI. Now, in terms of business loans, again, there has been a lot of relaxation, a lot of progress in this area. There are, again, many complications. As we know, there are NPAs which are very, very massive in the country. The banks are facing huge problems of non-performing assets, which they have to cope and tackle and reduce. So the government is improving the ease of getting business loans, but then the aspects of foreign exchange rates comes into play. How do you manage those with the devaluations and fluctuations in the currency rates? Then the aspect of taxation issues come into play. Already in the issue of taxation, India has been rated as one of the better countries in the world with one of the lower taxes, and it's improving its rankings very, very significantly in this field of taxation. Then you also have the issue of repatriation of your profits. So business loans percentage wise, for example, the cost of a business loan in India is much higher than if I apply for a loan in an American bank and take it as dollars and convert it to India into rupees. Because here I get loans for very, very low interest rates. There I have to pay a lot more. So many people do that. They take loans in the US in a big way. They establish a collaborative venture with an Indian partner who takes a smaller loan from an Indian bank, and then they put together a stakeholding partnership and an equity partnership with a significant amount of US funding also into the mix. So that simplifies this procedure to a great extent, and it makes it easier for Indians to do their businesses in India. This thing will only increase because what is happening today, if I see the geopolitical situation across the globe, the trust on countries like China has plummeted downwards very, very significantly amongst all the major corporations of the world, not just the US. A lot of governments have passed laws to make it very, very difficult for their countries to invest in China or for their companies, multinationals, to invest in China. Plus, they have said, like Japan and other countries have said that anybody who wants to quit China, Japanese companies, and come back to Japan or set up their establishments and operations in India or Southeast Asia, any other country, they will support it very significantly with loans also, with backing. So many countries are doing that. So with such a vast market opening up, such vast opportunities opening up, with Chinese, image in the world in very serious global decline, which will only accelerate as things progress. It is not going to stop. So the opportunities are very vast, and the Indian businesses, of course, will learn. If I am working in India, I am used to working in the Indian environment of business. Now, if I collaborate with Philip Thomas or with, Joseph John or somebody else here, you are going to bring in that knowledge much more to more Indian people in India as to how things work in the US. And then I will start demanding from my government that, okay, make it simpler in this way and that way. Already this government has carried out reforms which have never been done before. If I see anything in India today, in so many areas like the healthcare, the unique health ID effort, the unique ID effort, the property, I had to do some transaction. My personal story, my mother was, gifting me her house in Bombay, and I had to go there. And I thought it would be a very difficult process with a lot of corruption and a lot of delays and a lot of bribes. And what happens? Maharashtra, Bombay, what happens? And nobody took a rupee, not a single per. This is after I have finished my tenure with the government, after I have retired. Not a single rupee was asked for. And when I would say that how much time it will be done, the next step, they would say that by tomorrow morning. So I would go tomorrow morning and it would be digitized. One step is over and next step is over. So within a week to do everything, and after a week that officer calls me to his office and hands me a DVD or a CD and says, here are all the records of the property transfer. You can keep it, you can download it, and everything is now visible on internet. Everything is available on internet. So many states have done that. So already with the amount of technological progress which is happening in terms of artificial intelligence, in terms of cloud computing, in terms of data analytics, in terms of augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, in terms of the next generation of quantum computing and blockchain technology. Now, the moment these technologies become more widely used in India, like blockchains, then to find solutions for business loans or any of the other issues raised is not difficult. Including this dual citizenship, how to implement it becomes a much easier thing, because then you have multi-layered levels of understanding of machines and artificial intelligence. It's not just one level or a 3D level. It becomes hundreds of dimensions possible. The other aspect I would like to say is, for a lot of your questions which you have, if we are not able to answer them today, what I would suggest is the following, that these are very genuine questions. So you have to understand that you have every right to ask these questions. So please ask them to the concerned people here in the US, like we had Dr. Swati Kulkarni. So all the people which the Consulate General of India, Atlanta, looks after, all the neighboring states of Atlanta. Please ask your questions there. Similarly, any Consulate General which you are falling under, whether it's New York, New Jersey, etc., Vermont, etc., ask there, Chicago, Houston, all these places, you can ask the questions to the Consulate General. If you do not receive a reply, you can send reminders, and I'm sure you'll get a reply. And if you still don't get a reply, you can write to the Embassy of India in Washington, D.C. And then you will get a reply from the Consulate General of India in your particular state. That is the first level. If your questions are something which are much more than that, I have given to Dr. Chalil the details of the Ministry of External Affairs. I can request whoever has the control of the screen sharing, you can do that. The details of the officers in India who are in the division of overseas Indian affairs. I've given the telephone numbers, I've given the emails of all those officers. You can write directly to them that this is the problem that you face and can you please help me. That is at the second level. So this is one list. The email is cut off at the right, but it just means mea.gov.in. Every email is with mea.gov.in. Manika Jain, this is two. There is a list one also. There are two territories. Yeah, one looks after US and Canada and all the other countries. Yeah, and two looks after half the world in another part. So one is where we are. So Ramu, then Piyush Gupta and all these officers, their emails are here, their telephone numbers are here. You have to add 9111 because they're all Delhi based numbers and call them up. So that is at the second level. At the third level, there is another ministry of redressal of public grievances, which you just say Ministry of Redressal of Public Grievances. On the internet you find it. So if your public grievances, if you have got into a bad business partnership with somebody, or with a bank is troubling you, or any other issue is there in India, you can put your grievances and complaints to that site, by which time most likely you would have found solutions. And at the ultimate level, if your problem is of a bilateral character, which is not an individual character, which is a country level character, which you want to raise it to the highest level, this Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister Modi, has his own portal where you can log in for important questions, only important issues, or suggestions about how to make India more progressive in the future. And what are your suggestions? Suppose you have to say dual citizenship at the country level. Not that I am so and so and I want dual citizenship. That will not work for that website. You have to say that my suggestion is that dual citizenship could be thought of in this way. And then what happens, I have seen people who have written on that portal country level suggestions, and then they start getting responses, and suddenly after 3 months, 6 months, you find a policy level action taking place. So this is my own suggestions and background information for all of you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for so patiently answering our questions. We really appreciate it. I'd like to yield my time and give this to Mr. Roy to move forward. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Okay, I'm Mr. Roy Agustin. I'm an executive member of Atlanta chapter of IAPSC. My question is to our chairman, Dr. Joseph Chalil. What is the scope of investing in Indian businesses for Pravasis without dead-end procedures?
Thank you so much, Roy, for the question. Again, as a businessman who have done businesses in India, it is, as I would say, it wasn't easy in the past. So the easy way of transferring money to India, was always difficult because there was no easier way. You take a, check to India, cashier's check, take weeks to pass, then you get a different rate. You take a regular check, it'll take months to clear Indian banks years ago. The wire transfer was an option with a lot of fees and, difficult exchange rates. The challenge was not just bringing money to India. And then the easier one was all these backhand Hawala transactions, which a lot of people, went into. It's a legal way of doing it. And now that's changed. So now investing into India became very easy. I can transfer money to India for free within a few minutes, for that matter, almost instantaneous transfer to money using softwares or apps like Remitly and other softwares out there. They give best, exchange rates and no fees, and the money is in the person's bank account, within seconds, for example. Number two, the exchange rates have stabilized. The challenge of investing in India is the problem is when you invest the dollar rate is let's say 25 rupees per dollar, and then once you try to repatriate, the dollar is now at 72 rupees per dollar. So you only have profit gains, even though your properties or investment have made profits, will become zero when you consider the exchange rate risk. So the challenges are still there. So I would highly recommend, Ambassador, one of the ask I have to the government of India is maybe similar to what China did, is to peg the Indian currency to US dollar at whatever rate you fix, at 72, at 75, at 90, doesn't matter, but peg it, which gives stability to the market, so foreign investment, and also allow people to repatriate without much challenges. So if I can, if I know for sure that the dollar, if I take $100,000 to India tomorrow, I can bring back that $100,000 in 2 years or 3 years. As my profit share in my Indian business, it'll bring in a boom. Again, India will lose some financial stability, some control on it. Reserve Bank might have to lose, let go currency rate controlling mechanism, but it is possible. Like UAE has done it. China was doing it. It's possible to do it. I hope Indian red tape will become less in starting businesses. That's not a challenge if you want to start a business in India. And because India doesn't have this single member LLC sort of business structure in India. It's always limited companies, which is difficult to start, and they have all these rules about reporting, and so it is easy. So I'm hoping my request to Ambassador and the government of India would be to make it easier for us to invest, make it less risky for foreign investment to come in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for your insight. And
legal reform is one other thing which is challenging all of us, is that if you end up suing somebody in Indian court, it's going to be there for decades. So India definitely need a legal reform or revamping the legal system where we have some timely decisions made. I'm not sure that's an easy answer to solve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my second question is, we have 3 minutes for that. As you know, we Pravasis are concerned about our elderly parents in India, their health and well-being. So what are the government approved insurance plans for elderly parents in India?
So thank you for the question. I think it's a challenging topic to discuss. The problem will be, as I was telling Ambassador yesterday, that the youngsters, the children, the grandchildren of Indian families, where we all had joint families in the past, decades before, where the grandparents were taken care of by the children and grandchildren, because of the economic structure where the children are migrating to Gulf and the Middle East, or to other cities in India like Bangalore, Bombay, Delhi to work. And then the grandkids are growing up, with the parents in those apartments in Mumbai, or Delhi, or Bangalore, Chennai, or Middle East, or USA. Their village houses with the parents, grandparents are laying empty, maybe with a servant, but not enough healthcare access. But again, I'm not sure insurance is the way to go, because it's not about insuring people; it's about how do we provide care for them. It's more than insuring. So I was telling Ambassador, this is a great place to invest into in retirement living in India. I think there'll be a lot of need for it. I know the PMJY, the Prime Minister's insurance program, does guarantee 5 lakh rupees per year to every Indian citizen. It's on your ration card. So that need to be increased, but hopefully we can provide more care. I think I would make this request on behalf of IAPC to the Ambassador to take it to the Ministry of External Affairs and to the other ministries, concerned ministries in India.
Sure. If there is a proposal which is put together in writing, then it becomes easier to forward it.
Okay. Maybe IAPC board or leadership team can put together a memoranda in such a request and to forward to Ambassador, to forward to the ministers and the ministry.
Sure. Pleasure.
I know we are getting out of time, Johnny.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, Mr. Charlie. for your insight. Yeah. All right, it's back to Jomi.
Jomi, you're on mute. Go ahead, I muted.
So, thanks again. I felt like I was sitting through the classroom to learn a lot of things from our ambassador. I hope we can continue our session. It's a learning experience as well. As many of you know, that our president here in Atlanta chapter, he's been an advocate for these issues, and there are a few more things we want to discuss. Probably as a discussion number 2 or part 2, we can conduct another session of our conversation. Due to time, we would like to conclude our meeting in the next minute or 2. And again, it's a privilege to understand the inside of what's happening in the government. And as a Indian origin living in America, some of the important issues we discussed today, it's really important to each and every one of us. And few more questions we have to let it go for today, and we would like to bring that up on our session 2. And Dr. Chal being extremely helpful, being coordinate all these, connecting to the ambassadors and so on and so forth. And it's been a really privilege to get to hear from them personally. And unfortunately, our Consul General has to go. She had other commitments today and couldn't stay through the whole meeting. And in closing, from Atlanta chapter AAPC, we'd like to take this time to thank Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor and our chairman, Dr. Chalil, and the Consul General. It is our privilege to get to know you and to understand your wisdom and to share these things which affecting each and every one of us. And once again, I would like to give 30 seconds to Ambassador and Chalil, and if Matthew Joy is also online, in closing, if you had to say in general statement in closing, would you like to take 30 seconds or so and in closing, so we can close this meeting here?
Sure. It'll be a pleasure. Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate that very warmly. What I'd like to say in closing is the following, that for most of us on the screen here today on this online webinar, I have to congratulate the organizers for putting together such a good show and having such good active participation. But for most of us, US is our karma bhumi, where we are working, and India is our janma bhumi. Now, the future of the world lies in these two countries coming together positively. And as diaspora people here in the US, you have an obligation to your alma mater in India, to your country of birth, India, and to your country of work, USA, to see how you can do your little bit contributing for the betterment of relations between these two countries, for the future of the world, for a better future for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Dr. Chalil?
Thank you all for having a great discussion today. Especially congratulations to Atlanta chapter leadership, Jomi and the team for organizing it. It's been excellent. I think we should do more. Hopefully, we have the next month's the second Saturday event. We could do one more in similar aspects on Pravasi aspects. So we could bring in maybe the Consul Generals of New York or Houston or Chicago to answer some additional questions. That'll be great. So I congratulate you all, and I thank you all for your support.
Thank you. Dr. Matthew Joyce, are you online? You also get 30 seconds. So we're going to close the session here.
I'm Matthew Joyce. Thank you, Jomi, for giving me 30 seconds. Thanks a lot for the IAPC Atlanta team and members for hosting this event of crucial importance. And many of our questions have been answered. And definitely we can have a second part of this particular Pravasi issues in shortly. And IAPC will surely be organizing similar platforms every month, where we'll be able to address many topics of social importance and create a broader awareness of the issues around us. As an additional information, I can say that there is a non-resident Indians Commission in Kerala, chaired by retired Justice P.D. Rajan, who will be able to answer any question and helping us freely. I think there will be similar Pravasi Non-Resident Indians Commission in other states too. In case you want, I can give the email as well as phone numbers to contact Justice P.D. Rajan at any time. Thank you all for actively participating in the Zoom meeting and watching our Facebook streaming all around the world. Thank you all, and especially for Jomi for coordinating it, and other teams all around us, and who supported from Alberta, Dr. Chalil from Florida, and especially my special thanks to Ambassador Pradeep Kapoorji and Consulate General Swati Kulkarni. Thank you all, and be waiting for other Zoom meetings coming shortly. Thank you.